Welcome to Garage Kings. I'm Michael Artsis. We're here in Brooklyn, New York. Yes, that's right, Brooklyn. Can you believe we found a garage called Lenny's Garage, and we've brought you to the garage? This is one of the special ones. It's a 34 Ford. This car has a huge V8 engine in it, which gives it a lot of power and speed, and also beautiful styling. Hollywood stars in the 30s bought this car because of its elegance. Outlaws love it too. It's not just for moonshiners and gin runners. Bonnie and Clyde, yeah, they died in this car. Let's go find out more from Lenny.
I'm Lenny Schiller. I've been collecting cars since I'm a youngster, but avidly since 1986. I'm now up to, well, 70 cars, going back as far as 1912. And I've had to, unfortunately, buy bigger and bigger garages because of my habit of just buying and never selling. And it's become a tremendous interest, and I'm kind of known in some circles as Brooklyn's Jay Leno, Lenny the car guy. And I always think back to my mom, who lived to 91, who many years ago said to me, she said, "Lenny, why don't you get rid of some of those cars and get yourself a life?" And now the cars have sort of become synonymous with me. So it's kind of an interesting turnaround. She was still alive when I bought this building, and I brought her here. And then she realized how serious a collector I was, and I think things settled down.
Who repairs the cars?
I do most of the work myself. I can do all the brake work. I can do the tune-ups. I'm a fanatic about collecting parts. So if Steve's Auto Parts closed down, I bought 900 fuel pumps. So I have fuel pumps or diaphragms from the fuel pumps for all these cars. Maddie's Auto Parts closed down. I bought all his brake parts, so I can rebuild, except for a dual master, I can rebuild all the wheel cylinders and master cylinders because I've accumulated so many parts. I have 2,500 spark plugs, all old numbers, even big 7/8 plugs. I'm a backyard, what you call a backyard mechanic. I was not trained as a mechanic. I have a very good friend who's now 94, Joe Manella, who was a professional mechanic. I used to call him all the time for advice. "Joe, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, what should I do?" And he would always give me advice. And now I'm proud to say that as he's aged and he's forgot stuff, once in a while he calls me. I dislike driving. So I like to know that they're running, I can drive them around the block. If I go anywhere to a car show or to the AACA meeting in Philadelphia, I always find somebody else to drive. Because what does driving do for you? It gets you from point A to point B. But if someone else is driving, you could be reading a shop manual, you could be, you could be doing a crossword puzzle. They all run. I mean, I can tinker with them, I can prime them. I'm not sure that they all stop because the brake work is keeping the brakes working, especially on where you have hydraulic brakes, which is the majority of the cars. But when they sit, the brakes lock up, the wheel cylinders leak, but they do all run. Proud to say that.
What is it that attracts you to the cars you have?
Probably mostly style. I grew up with cars from the 40s and the 50s. So that was my idea. I wanted this to be a post-war collection. Basically, I just wanted to have my grandmother's 36 Chevy and then have everything else post-war, like 40. I don't like fins that much, so I'd say 46 through 58. And then I decided, well, maybe I should have one car from every year from 1936 to 1958. And at this point, I'm only missing 1938 and 1940.
Purrs, Lenny.
Bill, you did a good job on this car. I didn't even have to change the plugs, just clean the points. That was it.
What about this 34 Ford? This 34 Ford is stunning. It's a really beautiful car. A lot of Hollywood stars would forego getting more expensive cars to get this car back in the day because of the styling. A lot of people could tweak them and tune them and still do to this day, hot rodding them.
Most of the police had 6-cylinder cars, and people like, as he was saying, Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde knew that this Ford V8. So when they stole cars, they stole Ford V8s. That's kind of a funny story.
A 34 Ford, suicide doors, which is very interesting.
Dual suicide doors. Both the front and the rear doors open the wrong way.
That's pretty cool. What's special for you about the 34 Ford?
What's special is I knew the prior owner. His name was Bill Gramlich. Yeah. He died 11 years ago. He was 70 years old. But what's special is that was his father's car. and he restored it.
Wow.
And he was a member of the Brooklyn Car Club. So I knew the prior owner. And he did have a grandson who was 19 when I bought it. And I said, if ever he wants the car, it can come back to the family.
Now, you really don't like driving?
Not really. I don't like driving. I mean, I don't mind it, but I just don't. Why drive when you can tinker with an old car? The fun of it is knowing it's running, you drive it around the block, and then that's it. And you're done.
So you like looking at them, not driving them?
Yeah, I like the design features, and I like tinkering with them, fixing them more than I do driving them.
This is a pretty basic car, though, inside. I mean, it's
yeah, very
outside,
basic, very basic car.
There's no radio.
No. There is a heater, but that's about it.
So back when this car came out, I mean, there weren't that many paved roads really yet. There certainly were no interstates.
I'm amazed that these cars, did what they did. I mean, they drove Model A cross country. It's astounding to think about it, but they drove a Model A across country.
I can't imagine driving this for a long period of time, although I will say it's very comfortable.
It's pretty easy.
I mean, you had to really concentrate and know how to drive. There's no power or anything, so you have to be super alert.
Driving a shift car keeps you more alert.
Right.
Because you got to be, you have to be aware of what gear you're going into and all. And the fact that the shift lever is on the floor, it's right over the transmission, so it's very easy to shift. Very, very easy to shift. Because when it's on the column, basically the floor shifter went away in the late 30s. And they put it on the column, and then you have to have a linkage running down and across and over. And I've occasionally had trouble with the linkage, whereas with these, it's right over the tranny. There's no trouble.
The interesting thing is the rear view mirror is a piece of glass.
Yes.
And you got 46,000, is that original miles?
Very possibly, very possibly. As I say, it was his fellow's father's car, and he restored it, so he was always working on this car.
Wow.
Check out the little ammeter.
So that's
amps. That's not volts, that's amps.
Wow. We drive these cars gently now, but back in the day, they really pounded on these cars.
Hey, listen, Bonnie and Clyde sped around in these cars at 70 miles an hour, outrunning police.
Isn't that amazing to you?
It's amazing.
And
but keep in mind there were new cars back then. I mean, let's face it, this car may have components. This car is a 34. So this car is, what, 83 years old? Am my math correct?
Something like that.
This car has old components in it. Back then it had all new components. Metal has stress. I believe you could break it.
So Bonnie and Clyde why did they like V8 Fords?
Faster than the 6-cylinder police cars, simple.
So they would steal V8?
Only stole V8 Fords because they knew that these cars would outrun the police cars.
And there were a lot of them out there at that point, but not a ton out there. I mean, they probably had to hunt for their cars.
Yeah, they probably sold a good amount of V8s starting, probably not in 32 so much, but probably 33, 34, 35 in those years. They probably sold a lot of these cars.
All right, Matt, walk us through this 1934 Ford.
First of all, it is the second year of the streamlined body style. I mean, the 32, everybody loved the 32 because of its lines.
Oh.
Then, of course, the Ford V8, which people found out very quickly could be modified for a lot more power. The beauty of the 34 was that it reached a peak styling-wise, because after this, you can make the argument that they were just coming out with new designs to be different. The 36, 37, and it wasn't until, say, 40 that they went to a completely new design and then start all over again. This was really the first V8 that came out in 32 that was really any good. I mean, Cadillac had a V8s, V12s, and V16s, but they're hyper expensive. This brought speed to the masses.
And this car could do 70 miles an hour, which was extremely fast back then. I imagine it had leaf suspension, both in the front and the rear.
Transverse leaf springs,
yeah.
And they were used to call buggy springs back then.
Oh, buggy springs.
And it was still in the era of Henry Ford, still very much alive, still very much in control. But Henry insisted on keeping things simple, but it also meant that these cars were extremely easy to repair, extremely easy to maintain, and of course, when people discovered what the V8 could do, could be modified for a lot more speed.
Yet, they're 17-inch. Tube-type tires, and I think originally they were red.
17 in the front and the back?
17s, yes.
Yeah.
500, 550, 17s. You know, it starts right up. It's got mechanical brakes. I don't have to worry about whether I have to add hydraulic fluid to it. You just leave a little extra distance. And Bill had that car purring.
A little history there is that this engine was made until 1953 in the States, but continued on in other countries.
Am I correct that this has no tachometer? Did I just notice that?
No, no tachometer, no.
So how would you know when to shift? Just by engine noise?
By engine noise. You can feel it once it's pulling a little bit, you shift. I mean, that's a skill that you learn, you know, where to shift. You know, notice the trunk is exterior to the car, and that's why the American cars that have trunks built into the car are called trunks, whereas in England it's called the boot. There was really a trunk on these cars.
How did you get into collecting cars?
Well, if you look yonder, there's a 36 Chevrolet. That was owned by my grandmother. She bought it new in January of 1936. The 36 Chevy, my grandmother traded in a 32, and I think the sticker price was in the $600 range on that car. And by the way, that's the Impala of its day. It's called a Master Coach. 1936 Chevy Master Coach, had an independent Dubonnet, right? Dubonnet knee action front suspension, wow, which was like a combination shock and spring all built into an independent front suspension. And she had it up in the Catskills. When I was a little kid and I went up, my parents went up to visit her. Actually, we used to go up on the old Erie Railroad and then use that car up that way. She was forced to keep it during World War II because she couldn't buy another car, and then she wound up driving very sparingly, so she just kept the car until 1967. And then she didn't want to give me the car because she said it was unsafe. It had a problem with the steering, and she was correct. I got the car, I had to put a steering box in. That was the first thing I ever did on an old car, and I loved tinkering with the car. And the next thing you know, a neighbor of mine in '68 had a '54 Mercury, which is right there. 19,000 miles I bought the car. The man lived till 100. He was one of the wealthiest attorneys in New York City. I had offered him $200 for that car, and I used to visit him every 2 weeks. That's a '54 Mercury, Monterey, two-door hardtop. Very desirable car. Has power steering, power brakes, and an early V8. Finally, he wasn't using it. He finally decided to sell it to me, and he said, but I'm not taking $200 for that car. And so I said to him, well, what do you want? He said, $250. So I ran home, got another $50 bill, and I got the car.
And then from there, it was off to the races?
Well, then the same year, '68, another neighbor had a '53 Jaguar Roadster that he had in his garage. It had a bad rear end, and he wasn't using it. He said, you know, I see you tinkering with these cars. Why don't you tinker with this car? And who knew? And again, that was a 15-year-old used car. So who knew that that car became the ultimate sports car? Creaking.
What do you think that is?
Suspension, probably. been sitting for 11 years, keeping that in mind. So I may have to get under and check linkages and suspension or whatever.
How is putting the clutch in? It seems like it's a stiff clutch, is it?
No, it's fine. It's very, very, very easy. Very easy car to drive. I'm not even double clutching. I'm just shifting carefully, and I can actually, well, I can upshift. Probably if I had a downshift while I was moving, I'd probably have to double clutch.
And then the upholstery seems like it's just made out of fabric. It's some kind of
it's a fabric.
like a cotton fabric or almost a wool. And there are no seatbelts in this car.
No seatbelts. No seatbelts. If they weren't original equipment, they wouldn't have been required.
Right.
There were no signals. You notice I'm hand signaling. There's no
I didn't
signals.
realize that.
Yeah. There's no signals. No signals either. Straight out for a left turn, up for a right turn.
And stop was down, correct?
Yes, that's right. Stop is down, exactly, and you move your arm a little bit. What size engine the Ford V8 had in it?
221.
221 cubic inches, and that translates to what, about 3.5 liters?
3.6.
We started them with an easy one. You know, Buick had a famous car called the Electra, as you recall, right?
Of course, my aunt owned one.
She did. Most of them were like 19 feet long.
Yep.
Not
yes,
quite.
I know where you're going with this.
Not
because
quite,
the 225 is the car's length in inches.
That's correct.
Is that what you were going to ask?
That's the question. Not only did he get the answer, this is better than Jeopardy. He got the question. That's incredible.
I think that's how you play Jeopardy, in all fairness. You have to get the question.
Yes, originally the all-time leading single production vehicle was the Model T Ford. They produced 14, 15 million of them, right?
Exactly, yeah.
What car surpassed that?
The Beetle.
Okay, Volkswagen Beetle, good. And what car surpassed the Volkswagen Beetle? Single model production car.
Well, the Toyota Corolla.
He's got it. He's got it. He's got it. Oh, there's a but.
The Beetle was the original. This is a Ferdinand Porsche design with some variations from start to finish. Various improvements, but just like the old 911, the air-cooled 911, you could pull parts from an old Beetle to a new one.
Yeah. So you're going to say that the Corolla changed its body throughout, so it's a different model in your mind.
The Beetle and the Model T were the same basic design from start to finish.
It's a good point.
So that's why the Corolla, cars with the Corolla nameplate, yes, absolutely.
More than anything else.
But how many different Corollas have there been?
When Toyota started bringing its cars in, what was the first car they brought in? The name of the first car they brought in?
Toyopet.
This man is good. Okay, what's the first Cadillac with a fin and the last Cadillac with a fin?
The first Cadillac with a fin came out in 48.
It did. It was a 49. Came out in 48.
And the last Cadillac with a fin? Oh man, it's we're looking at it.
That's
64.
it. Good man. I can't stump him. I founded the Brooklyn region of the Antique Automobile Club of America 5 years ago. I thought it would be nice. There's a Long Island region, there's a Staten Island region, there's a Westchester region. In fact, there's 4 Long Island regions. And I said, hey, you know what, we should have a Brooklyn region. And I had a tremendous amount of members to draw from, so I formed a region. And I have 2 or 3 projects that I'm supposedly working on, which I don't even know if I'll get to. There's always something that needs to be done on these cars. It's like there's a lifetime of maintenance. The most fun I have is when I'm in the garage alone, working on these cars, figuring out what's wrong, repairing it, tuning it, fixing the brakes, and then just driving the car around the block and say, hey, you know, because I fixed it, I can drive it around the block.